Here are some of the headlines we are featuring today from your favorite news outlets at offthepress.com. Former President Donald Trump Tuesday answered dozens of charges in the classified documents case with pleas of not guilty. He then left Florida for his New Jersey home, where he held something of a victory celebration, giving a fiery speech condemning the Biden team for being politically prosecuted. At the White House, President Joe Biden threw another South Lawn party, this time for his new federal holiday, Juneteenth, commemorating the emancipation of slaves. Vice President Kamala Harris is getting another political makeover. The White House has assigned a longtime Democratic fixer to her office to help Harris as the re-election campaign kicks off. And give it up for the Las Vegas Knights hockey team. After just 6 seasons in the NHL, they are the Stanley Cup champions after thrashing the Florida Panthers in 5 games. For stories like these and more updates all day long from your favorite news outlets, go to offthepress.com.
Well, folks, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Stinchfield. So as the world focuses on President Trump, I am laser focused on Joe Biden. The mainstream media wants to take a deep look at President Trump and these bogus charges against him. I, on the other hand, want to take a look at Joe Bribin. That would be a good name for him. In fact, my buddy Dick Morris came up with him. Joe Bribin. That's what he is. 17 tapes now exist, we believe. 15 Hunter Biden are on. 2 Joe Biden is on, laying out this pay-to-play bribery scheme involving the Ukrainian national who worked for Burisma, worked inside the Ukrainian government, that says he paid Joe Biden the $5 million. This is Joe Biden being asked about it.
Are there tapes that you accepted bribes, President Biden? Is that true?
Would you comment on the arrest of the former president, sir?
Didn't want to answer questions about the tapes. Didn't want to comment on President Trump. Didn't want to comment on anything. So the problem with this is Joe Biden doesn't have to answer questions because he knows the FBI is on his side. The FBI is the bodyguard detail for the Biden crime family. Forget about the Secret Service. The FBI offers up to Biden's far more protection than the Secret Service does. You look at the FBI, the cover-ups, you look at the stonewalling, you look at the arrogance of all of this. Josh Hawley had a chance to question the deputy director of the FBI yesterday. Watch this.
Will you commit to releasing this unclassified document that alleges that the President of the United States has taken $5 million or more in bribes from a foreign nation?
The document has already been released pursuant to a subpoena to the House Oversight Committee to meet.
Will you release the document to the public? It's unclassified. Don't you think the American people have a right to see it?
Senator, the document, as you know, contains sensitive information that has bearing on the life of the source of the information, potentially.
You can redact the source's name. We do this all the time.
Absolutely. This is the cover-up I'm talking about. Now, I want to spend a lot of time on this hearing because it's important. It shows the arrogance of the FBI. It shows that the deputy director believes that agency is above not just the United States Congress, but is above the United States of America and the people that make it up. This is Ted Cruz showing the arrogance of the FBI. It really is eye-popping. Take a look.
Does the FBI have 17 voice recordings laying out evidence of a bribery scheme?
Senator, I would add also that we've worked with the House Oversight Committee.
Yeah, this is the Senate. We're the other side of the Capitol. This is the Senate. Do you have those 17 recordings?
I'm not going to comment on any investigative matters, Senator.
See, that's the problem. The FBI, and I've had this conversation with Chris Wray too, this is why you are damaging the institution. The American people have a right to know whether there is serious, credible evidence that the President of the United States took a $5 million bribe.
Yes, we do. Which is why I'm calling on the FBI to release the tapes if they have them. They won't even admit that. My assumption is they probably do have access to these tapes. So they need to be released. We need to get the tapes, and the American public need to listen to it. Ted Cruz specifically asked this deputy director of the FBI about investigations into the Bidens.
Did you investigate in any way, shape, or form these allegations?
Senator, once again, I'm not going to comment.
So you're not going to say whether you did your job?
We do our job to the very best of our ability.
Well, not here. You're not answering a single question to the American people. And you may think this is esoteric. I promise you, millions of Americans are concerned. You know who isn't concerned? Not a single Senate Democrat. We're going to go through this whole hearing. Not one Democrat will ask a question about this. You know who else isn't concerned? The corporate media, who is joining with the Democrats in covering up this evidence.
I'm glad he used the word cover up, because that's exactly what it is. Think about it. It is a cover-up until the moment leaders of the Democrat Party say Joe Biden's no use to them anymore. Then you watch. These tapes will be leaked to the public quicker than you can say lickety-split. And Operation Oust Joe Biden will be well underway when they realize he can't win the presidency again. That's how the Democrats operate. Now, if this was President Trump caught on tape in some kind of a bribery scheme, we would have heard these tapes years ago. MSNBC would still be playing them tonight. But that's not how it works with two-tiered justice system that we have in America today. Marsha Blackburn asked the deputy director about that.
Objectively, there are not two standards of justice. There is only one. It's applied equally to each and every
by
person.
Perception, there are two standards, very clear standards of justice in this country. We see it every single day. The American people see this every single day. They look at you and they see a politicized entity that is weaponizing an agency of the federal government against the American people.
She's spot on. If there weren't a two-tier justice system in America, you would have had Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, all of them, George Bush, arrested for taking presidential documents and their belongings from the White House. All of them would be arrested. What about Hillary Clinton and all of her misdeeds? We don't need to go through all of them. I know you know about all of them. It is proof that there is a two-tier justice system. And remember, the FBI redacted out of this form that they let members of Congress read. They redacted the existence of these 17 tapes of the Bidens caught on these tapes laying out this bribery scheme. Why would you redact that unless it's a cover-up? They're co-conspirators in this crime. Marsha Blackburn again.
So you chose to redact the fact that there are 17 voice recordings, 2 of those with the now president. You chose to redact that and not to give that to House oversight.
I have no idea if there are voice recordings or not. What I will tell you with respect to the document, the document was redacted to protect the source, as everyone knows.
Well, then,
and this is a question of life and death,
my time has expired.
The problem is we're now piecing all of this together. You got Hunter's board seat on Burisma. Some time before the alleged bribe happened, and then shortly after the bribe goes through, allegedly, Hunter's on the board of Burisma, Joe Biden says this about his trips to Ukraine.
And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a got fired.
So, folks, listen to me very carefully. That prosecutor he's talking about was investigating Burisma, yes, the company Hunter held a board seat on. But more than that, That prosecutor wanted to put the Burisma founder in prison for money laundering and a slew of other charges. That man is now believed to be the man who allegedly paid Joe Biden the $5 million bribe. His name is Mykola Zlochevsky. Today, his whereabouts are unknown, possibly in Monaco, some people believe. After founding Burisma, Zlochevsky was Ukraine's Ecology and Natural Resources Minister. Then he was Deputy Secretary of National Security and Defense Council. As the Environment Minister, Mykola made it a practice of handing out gas licenses to his cronies, that from a British newspaper. You see how government and business is commingled in Ukraine? It's why that nation quickly became the money laundering capital of the world, the corruption capital of the world. Perfect for the Biden crime family to set up shop. The RICO case I have built against the Biden crime family starting months ago involves the FBI and the DOJ specifically to run cover for the Biden crime family. President Trump spelled out last night what his indictment is all about.
They want to distract from the real espionage and the real crime, so let's use President Trump to do so. Let's go out and let's indict President Trump so they don't talk about the $5 million bribe. The guy from Burisma, nice company, they got him and Hunter on 17 different tapes, supposedly, but the FBI isn't showing them. Remember, they impeached me for asking a simple question about Biden's corrupt dealings in Ukraine, and now they see that once again I was right.
President Trump has always been right, every single time, which is why he says when he wins back the White House, he's going to appoint a special prosecutor to look straight into Biden family corruption. Joining me now, former Congressman and current Truth Social CEO, Devin Nunes is with us. Devin, it's great to have you back on the program.
Great to be with you, Grant. Thank you.
Devin, what did you make of the hearing with the Republican senators really asking poignant questions to the FBI, who then put it on display of all of the arrogance that they have?
Yeah, look, the FBI is going downhill quickly, Grant. And what caught me in the bits and pieces that I've seen of that is that typically you wouldn't release information if there was an ongoing investigation. But that's not what the FBI says. So they basically have no reason. There is no ongoing investigation. I don't think they've done anything except for bury that information. So that's what kind of caught me just directly is they have no reason to keep this information from the United States senators.
During your time in Congress, you were so ingrained in the intelligence world, national security world, with all the duties you did in Congress. Had you heard of this Burisma executive, Mykola Zlochevsky? Do you know anything about him?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember. The names all sound the same, and they're hard to say because they're not common American names that I'm used to. But this is important, you remember. So I was the guy who unfortunately had to deal with the first Trump impeachment, and it was over this. Burisma, all of these people. And you may remember at the time, there was a journalist who I think you're friends with on your network named John Solomon. He was lambasted. They destroyed him. He nearly got fired from all of his jobs because he had the audacity to report on, hey, we think there's something here with the Bidens, Burisma, the board seat, all of the things we now know. So yeah, Grant, I guess the bottom line is when we brought that up, we were told, that's Russian disinformation. You're just doing the bidding. This is you trying to help Trump. And now it comes out years later. In fact, what they accused Trump of doing, they actually were doing themselves. And now they've done with this indictment of President Trump.
Yeah. John Solomon is a terrific reporter, one of the guys I have the most respect for. And you're right, I am friends with the guy, and he does tremendous work of informing the public on issues like this. What amazes me is this is just another example. President Trump said they spied on his campaign. They spy on his campaign. He said the Russian collusion deal is a hoax. Turns out it's a hoax. We talks about Burisma. Turns out now we got Burisma. Everything he has told us has come to be true, and yet the media, Democrats, everybody continues to go after him with everything. Tell me why.
Because we're in a really dark chapter of American history that has been going on for a while, but the institutions have collapsed in this country, and they're solely owned by the Democratic Party. We're basically entering this strange era of the combination of big government, big business, the radical left, and the tech media companies. All of them together are keeping the left in power. And that's really the danger here as we move forward is, because there's only a few states at the end of the day that are truly up for grabs. And can Donald Trump win those states? Can he beat Joe Biden in Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin? Those 4 states we're going to hear an awful lot about over the course of the next year and a half.
Yeah, we sure are. We now could see more charges, we're told, could be coming out of Georgia, all to derail and get themselves involved in a presidential election. Lastly, I'll ask you, with all your experience of dealing with stuff like this, do you think the FBI has these tapes?
Good question, Grant. I think the answer is, I bet they do somewhere. But you know what? It's kind of like the latest information now that came out about the pipe bomber on January 6th. The information is unusable. I think that's what we'll find out. But it's possible that perhaps some of the FBI whistleblowers may have provided that information already. We don't know what Senator Grassley and James Comer have.
Yeah, interesting. Last question for you. I believe there are those inside the FBI that are co-conspirators in this. I think the cover-up of what Joe Biden and his family have done is criminal in nature. Do you?
Yeah, look, what's happened here is that they have a little cabal using the National Security Division within the Department of Justice and the FBI, and it's essentially acting as the Gestapo. How do we know that? Because every time we turn around, what do they use? Russian disinformation. Russian disinformation. That's how they done. That's how they investigated Trump the first time. It's what they used to cover up for during the Ukraine impeachment hoax. They said that was Russian disinformation. They covered up the Biden laptop. They then covered up, you move forward, and now they're saying that, anytime that you move forward, it's Russian disinformation. So they are using that division and that narrative that they have sadly poisoned the minds of roughly half of America who believes that, somehow, some way, Trump and Republicans have something to do with Russia, and it just continues to this day. But they're controlling the most powerful levers of the United States government. The justice system working with the intelligence agencies. That's what's going on here.
Yeah, it is a frightening time for this country, as you mentioned right at the top of this interview. Devin Nunes, it's always great to talk to you. I appreciate you spending some time with us tonight. Thank you.
My pleasure, Grant. Thank you.
All right, good seeing you, too. And Truth Social's doing great, too, by the way, under his leadership. And with President Trump, pay that website, social media platform, a visit. I'm on it, by the way, Stinchfield 1776. The indictment of President Trump, is it even lawful? I don't agree. I don't think it is. The Presidential Records Act would seem to say that it is not lawful. We'll talk about that with the professor. Alan Dershowitz is here. That's up next.
Clinton lost the nuclear codes, and absolutely nothing was done about it. He lost the nuclear codes. The George W. Bush White House lost 22 million emails. A document shredding truck was spotted on the way to Dick Cheney's house. Can you imagine? Hillary Clinton took hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of furniture, china, flatware, rugs, and more from the White House, and she wasn't prosecuted.
All right, so folks, what President Trump just spelled out there is at the heart of his defense. It's called selective prosecution. You let everybody else skate, but you go after President Trump. He's got some defense here in all of this. Just listen to Joe Biden last November.
We just have to demonstrate that he will not take power by if he does run, making sure he, under legitimate efforts of our Constitution, does not become the next president again.
And I think you can use that in a court case, saying, hey, he spelled it out. The guy who leads the entire government says they're coming after me. Now, this case, in my opinion, all falls down to one very important issue. Are these documents classified or not that President Trump has? President Trump says they're not classified. I'm really tired of having pundits saying the classified documents he had. Why are you saying that? President Trump says they're not classified. He says he declassified them. The prosecution says they're classified, but that's a big difference. That needs to be played out, I believe, in a court of law before this case can even go forward. We've got to determine whether or not these documents are actually classified. And imagine if a court says they're not classified. Under the Presidential Records Act, President Trump could take them with him. Look, Bill Clinton had this sock drawer deal. He had 79 tapes. Him on tape, like Richard Nixon, discussing the most sensitive national security issues. There was a lawsuit. Judicial Watch wanted the tapes. Court ruled in Bill Clinton's favor. Said, no, they're Bill Clinton's. They're his to keep. So how will this play out? I want to bring in now one of the greatest legal minds in America, one of the most respected legal scholars, as well as #1 best-selling author. His new book, Get Trump, The Threat to Civil Liberties, Due Process, and Our Constitutional Rule of Law. It's on bookshelves and online now. Of course, I'm talking about the professor. Alan Dershowitz is here. Professor, great to have you back on.
Well, thanks. You know, as I wrote in my book, Get Trump, what they should have done is not selected a special prosecutor to go after Trump. They should have selected a special prosecutor to look at the problem of former officials having classified material. So that special investigator could have looked at Sandy Berger, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Pence, and I suspect many, many other presidents who have taken material with them, and also Donald Trump, and then done a comparative analysis. Then maybe Smith could get up and say, there's one rule of law for everybody. He can't say that if he was only tasked to target one, Donald Trump. It was a mistake to do it that way.
If he did that, Professor, I picture the scene out of Goodfellas where all the mob guys are in prison and they're making pasta behind bars. In this case, it would be all ex-presidents and secretaries of state. They'd all be guilty of this if they did that, because I don't think President Trump did anything differently than anyone else has.
Here's what he did differently. He foolishly talked too much. There's a great plaque that people have in their houses of a dead fish, and on bottom it said, I'd still be swimming if I had kept my mouth shut. Now, if Donald Trump hadn't had that conversation with that writer of the book about Meadows, in which he waved a piece of paper, we don't know what it was. The government doesn't have that piece of paper, but you hear rattling apparently on the tape. And he said, I could have declassified that when I was president, but I didn't. That's going to be used as the main piece of evidence to argue that he knew he didn't declassify everything. Maybe he declassified a great many things. Now, Trump's defense is going to be, look, I do this all the time. I show off. I wave papers. Nobody has the paper. Nobody knows what's on it. Who knows what's classified, what's not classified? Under the Presidential Records Act, if it's personal, it belongs to me. If they think it's not personal, they should bring a civil suit, not a criminal action. So I think we're going to see a lot of litigation around that issue. The two issues we're going to see litigation around is the papers, and the other one is whether or not his conversations with his lawyers remain privileged or whether he violated those privileges by saying to his lawyer something like, wouldn't it be better if? Well, clients tell me that all the time. I've done this 60 years.
Of course.
You know, clients have said to me, wouldn't it be better if I ran to Brazil? Wouldn't it be better if I paid this guy? And the answer is always, no, it wouldn't be better. That's the kind of conversation you have, lawyer and client. You want to encourage those kinds of conversations. But after these rulings that were gotten in this case, I have to warn my clients, don't ask me any questions. If you ask me any questions like that, the privilege is waived. I have to give them a kind of Miranda warning. And I hope that issue will be litigated because it has done great harm to the lawyer-client privilege.
You would think in order to give your client the best defense, you need every little bit of information that your client has. And otherwise, if you can't get all the information, you can't defend them properly.
And you never get all the information because, you know, in the first meeting, they say, look, I didn't do anything. I should get the Nobel Peace Prize. In the second meeting, Nobel Peace Prize is off the table, but I didn't do anything. Third meeting, I did something, but not this. Fourth meeting, I did this, but I wasn't guilty. Fifth meeting, get me a deal. You know, these things happen. They develop over time, and you have to build confidence with a client. And if the client knows by asking you the wrong question, the lawyer can be called in, all of his notes. You know, lawyers are going to stop taking notes also because these notes form the basis for several counts of the indictment. I have to tell you, I've taught my students for years, don't take notes of what clients tell you because you never know into whose hands they will fall. Fortunately, I have a good memory. Some lawyers have less good memories. But these rulings have done very great harm to the lawyer-client privilege. And the special prosecutor played dirty pool in getting them. He got these rulings in the District of Columbia, knowing full well that he wasn't going to try the case in the District of Columbia, but he knew he'd have a better chance of getting positive rulings from the District of Columbia judges. So he went and got the rulings, and then he moved the case to Florida. Not fair.
Yeah, it seems like they stacked the system against President Trump, which is clearly what they've been doing. Kash Patel talked about the Presidential Records Act. I want you to listen to what he had to say and then get your take on this. Take a listen.
It doesn't matter if he took a sticky note or 10,000 boxes of information. Last count I had it, President Obama was still going through 3 million pages of documents he took. And it doesn't matter what's in them either. The same law would apply to him. And so the Presidential Records Act is simple. The president can take whatever he wants when he leaves office. That's it. And here's the kicker. Part of that act says it becomes his or her personal property.
All right, Professor, add in the Clinton sock drawer case that I talked about where court ruled in Clinton's favor that it's personal property. Anything left behind in the White House, I think, is what the judge wrote. Does that include classified information? Is Kash correct there?
Nobody knows the answer to that question. There are two statutes, one that covers classified information, the other that covers personal presidential documents. One statute was passed 40 years after the other, and so you'd think that they have to relate one to the other. This will become a big issue in front of the court, and I don't think anybody can predict how the Supreme Court will come out on information that could be both personal and classified. For example, what if you have a president who wrote a note to himself or a note to his wife or a note to his chief of staff, but a personal note, handwritten, about classified material? That would be both personal and it would be classified. And the question is which statute governs? Well, I can tell you one thing. The Presidential Records Act does not provide criminal penalties. And there's a concept called lenity. When you have two statutes, one of which applies criminal penalties and one of which doesn't, you generally are supposed to apply the one that doesn't provide for criminal penalties. So that will be a defense. Now, my problem is Trump's not going to be able to get the best lawyers in the country to defend him because Project 65, this McCarthyite group, has threatened any lawyer who defends Trump will have bar filings against him. And I wrote an article when they first said this, saying I will defend free any client, any lawyer who has bar charges against him for defending Trump. So guess what they did? They filed the bar charge against me. And doing it against everybody. It's McCarthyism. It's exactly what they did in the 1950s when I was in college. Any lawyer who defended somebody accused of being a communist was canceled, was subpoenaed, was gone after. Bar associations went to get him, and that's what they're now doing to Trump lawyers, and that explains why so many good lawyers have turned him down. I spoke to 3 of them in the last couple of days, all of whom are great lawyers, and they all said no, and they're all aware of what happened. One of them put it to me very directly. I don't want to be Dershowitzed. I don't want to have happen to me what happened to you when you defended President Trump. Now, whether you're for Trump or against him, whether you think he's guilty or innocent, you have to follow the standards of John Adams, who defended the Boston Massacre killers at a time when we were beginning to have a revolution. That's the American standard. Lawyers have to stand up and be willing to fight. And Project 65 and other people on the hard left are trying to stop lawyers from defending people like Donald Trump. That's wrong.
Well, that's not the America that I know. That's not the America that I try to defend on this program every night, and it only motivates me to fight harder and harder and harder.
Right. In my book, Get Trump, I have a whole chapter on this problem, a whole chapter on how they're going after lawyers. I wrote this 2 months ago, not now, how they're going after lawyers. I go through the whole story of Project 65 and all of that. And all Americans have to get behind stopping this attack on lawyers, because today it affects Donald Trump, tomorrow it affects your Uncle Charlie, and the next day it affects you.
Real quick, because I'm almost out of time. There's the issue of if these documents are classified, then does the lawyer need to have security clearance in order to look at that? How many lawyers have security clearance?
Well, you can get security clearance. The problem is if you get security clearance, your actions are very much limited. And I have refused to get security clearance in several cases where I've defended people. I'd rather fight the case on my own terms than have to get down on my hands and knees and plead with the government for permission to say something. So security clearance is a big deal.
Well, Professor Dershowitz, I know I don't need to apologize to you, but I am sorry about what happened to you and so many of the other attorneys and people surrounding President Trump just for working for the man and aligning themselves with him. The destruction to people's lives over this is not what this country is about. So
I worry about the young lawyers who are terrified that their careers will be ruined. I was banned from my local library. My books were banned. My local synagogue banned me. The community center banned me. I lost 15 pounds on what I call the Trump diet because nobody invited me to dinner. That was a good thing. But the attacks on lawyers today who defend people like Donald Trump just harks back to the baddest days of McCarthyism.
Hey, Professor, guess who didn't ban you? Old Stinchfield didn't ban you. You're always welcome here.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming on, as always. And folks, remember, the name of the book, again, is Get Trump, The Threat to Civil Liberties, Due Process, and Our Constitutional Rule of Law. Alan Dershowitz is he's a great American patriot. He's not even a Republican, and he stands up for President Trump. All right, a shocking report has come out showing that Catholic hospitals in America support transgender ideology, and not only that, perform sex change surgeries. These are in Catholic hospitals. We'll get to that next. I'll tell you what, folks, as a Christian, there is a very troubling report that is out, coming out of the Daily Wire and an organization that did this study that says the nation's largest Catholic healthcare system is performing transgender surgeries. This is what this bombshell report finds. So the hospital chain is Common Spirit. And this is from the Lepanto Institute, this report that found St. Francis Hospital in San Francisco, St. Francis Memorial, has something called a Gender Institute. And they're doing sex change operations at this Catholic hospital. But this goes against the moral fundamentals of Catholicism and, in my opinion, Christianity as a whole. This is a video directly from St. Francis Memorial.
So growing up, I didn't understand why something felt wrong. Eventually, in adulthood, that language existed. And I came to understand why I've always felt that I'm a woman, because I am. I eventually learned that that is called transgender. I eventually had the courage to say that out loud to myself.
All right, so you get the point. That's produced by St. Francis Memorial Hospital. It falls under this Common Spirit, we're told, as a result of this Lepanto Institute blockbuster report that exposed that some of these Catholic hospitals are offering sex change operations. And joining me now from Lepanto Institute is Michael Hitchborn. Michael Hitchborn, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me on.
So, I look at this and I say to myself, this goes against everything Catholicism, even Christianity, should be standing for. Is this all about money? This entire industry seems to me that once you get past the blurring the lines of men and women and the collapse of society, that there's a faction of this transgender mania that they love cashing checks.
Well, that's really the nuts and bolts of it. At the end of the day, Common Spirit Health really has to answer the question, can you serve both God and mammon? And the answer is no, obviously. They're serving mammon for sure. They're pulling in giant gobs of money so that they can perform these abominable practices. And they're ultimately what they're doing is they are preying on vulnerable, very confused, and quite honestly, mentally ill people. And they are sterilizing them, they're mutilating them, and they're doing it in such a way that it sounds like they're doing something great, and it's an abomination. It's terrible.
So, as a guy who grew up Catholic, I've drifted away from the Catholic Church in my path towards Jesus and God, but sterilization, I mean, that's got to be a no-no inside the Catholic Church.
It sure is. Sterilization, contraception, abortion, transgender mutilation. I mean, the Hippocratic Oath is very clear. First, do no harm. But what they're doing is they're taking healthy body parts, they're destroying them. They're taking healthy reproductive systems, they're destroying them. And they're doing so in the name of an ideology that attacks directly the Imago Dei, the image of God. So this whole thing is satanic all the way at its core.
So what did they say to you? Did you ask them for comment? Was there any reaction from them over this?
I worked very closely with the Epoch Times in breaking the story, and I know that they made multiple attempts and gave them ample time to respond to the report once it was finished, and they gave no response. They are not saying a word.
Well, you know, they've got these videos out. Look, I'll play one more. And it's not really like you can argue this is happening. They've got their own hospital videos. Roll that one.
I'm here to help you and make you happy. And once you know what makes you happy, then I can help you with that. And the gender confirmation surgeries are just to help you match and align yourself to what your true identity is and what you should have been born with. So once you know what that is, that's where I come in to help.
So I just read a report out by Dr. McCullough, who's made so inroads of exposing the COVID crisis and nonsense, that he said through many studies have shown these gender reassignment surgeries where you try to put, an appendage on a woman, take one off. Most of them go horribly bad. They don't work. There are all kinds of complications. She talks about making people happy, not to mention the religious aspects of all of this. Michael, I'll give you the last word.
There's no happiness to be found in trying to transform your body into something that it was never intended to be. They have an ideology that is dualism at its center, which is this idea that you have the wrong soul in the wrong body, and so you have to do surgery to. It's a Frankensteinian application of medicine, and it doesn't work. All you're going to do is create monsters. You're going to make people extremely unhappy. This is why the suicide rates in the transgender community are higher than anywhere else. So they are doing terrible, terrible things to people, and when they finally realize what's happened to them, they go off and kill themselves, and that's why. But if people want to read the report, they can go to the Lepanto Institute website, lepantoin.org. And that's LEPANTO. And you can see the report. It's 64 pages. It's hard reading, but all the evidence is right there.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the work you've done on this. It's important that we keep exposing these types of things. Michael Hitchborn, I appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me on. God bless you.
Absolutely, you too. So, January 6 defendants testified at a field hearing yesterday hosted by our friend Matt Gaetz, the congressman, and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'll talk to our other buddy, John Strand, who testified at the event. He's a J6er, recently sentenced to 32 months in prison for doing his job on January 6th. That's next. You know, I take pride in being definitive in what I tell you. But I'm left thinking to myself, I don't know what is worse. I don't know which is worse when it comes to the dark days of democracy. What they are doing to January 6th defendants or what they are doing to President Trump. Both are horrific. I don't know if any one of them is worse than the other. Maybe they're equals. But it is a sad day with the persecution that our government is laying down upon people who believe in freedom and liberty. There was a field hearing about January 6th held by Congressman Matt Gaetz and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who've been really trying to expose what went on that day, especially when it comes to government involvement. I want you to hear the testimony of the aunt of Matthew Perna. Matthew Perna was a J6er who committed suicide after this Matthew Graves, a U.S. attorney who is a relentless, biased, anti-American U.S. attorney in D.C., her nephew committed suicide after the charges were laid on him. Listen to her at this hearing.
My amazing nephew, Matthew Lawrence Perna, left behind a father and a brother who are beyond devastated. Our family struggles every day, knowing that he died at the hands of our own Justice Department. We have become a country I no longer recognize. Our citizens have quickly been conditioned to fear speaking out for their beliefs. This needs to end. Nothing I do will ever bring Matthew Perna back. I have absolutely nothing to gain by being here today, but I will spend the rest of my life ensuring that he is never forgotten.
No matter what he did that day, and my guess is he probably didn't do much, he didn't deserve a death sentence. Nobody deserves what they're getting right now. My buddy John Strand is getting 32 months for literally serving as a bodyguard. Didn't do anything, didn't destroy anything. He's sentenced to 32 months. He testified. Listen to this.
President George Washington said, quote, "For if men are to be precluded from offering their sentiments on a matter, that would suggest the idea that reason is of no use to us, and then the freedom of speech may be taken away, and dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. The DOJ's dishonest distortions of my free speech to frame me as a criminal and mislead a jury have led to my wrongful conviction of serious crimes. And a DC judge's fury at my public criticism of the government's behavior has landed me years in prison. That is the textbook definition of fascism."
It sure is. Joining the show now, January 6th defendant who was recently sentenced, as I said, to 32 months in prison, has yet to have to report. John Strand is back with us. John, welcome back.
Thank you, Grant. It's good to be with you.
Real quick, any word on when you have to report?
No, still waiting for word from the Bureau of Prisons related to nearly 3 years in prison, as I mentioned earlier, for publicly criticizing the government, which literally is the textbook definition of fascism. And it is shocking to see this playing out in real time. Thank you for playing that clip also of Jerry Perna. And I can tell you exactly what Matthew Perna did that day. He was guilty of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, entrapped and framed by a corrupt and fraudulent federal government. That's what Matthew Perna did that day. That's what he is guilty of. So I want the record to be clear that Matthew, myself, and many other J6ers are red-blooded, God-fearing Americans that love and revere the Constitution and the rule of law, and we are guilty of nothing except exercising our First Amendment rights and refusing to relent from that.
We've had a lot of hearings on the subject. There have been great members of Congress like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene who keep calling attention to this and shedding a light on it. I'm not sure there's much more they can do. But did you have any hope coming out of that hearing yesterday? That is there anything Congress can do? Is there anything someone in a position of power can do to not just help you, John, but the other J6ers as well?
Absolutely, Grant. Thanks for asking the right questions. And 100% there's something that they can do. There's everything that they can do, because the only reason that Congress people exist is to represent us, we the people. It's our power that we grant them limited, restrained usage of in order to protect a organized, livable society for everyone. And if that government becomes weaponized against its own people, then it must be altered or abolished. That's not my quote. That's from the founders right in the Declaration. So yes, Congress is one of the three branches of government. The fundamental identity of what makes America what it is and so unique and special in human history is the concept of the separation of powers. And this has become a fraud. We have no separation. It's like pulling the lid off the Twitter files and realizing that the government and big tech was incestuously colluding to suppress and censor individual citizens. The three branches of the federal government are doing the same thing here.
I would like to offer up a play that these members of Congress could enact. Why don't they move to impeach this Matthew Graves, the U.S. attorney, and show in an impeachment trial, I believe, the devious nature of the cases that he ran against so many J6ers, including yourself. If he was convicted, that would put every one of your cases in jeopardy and grounds for a new trial. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea. I think they absolutely should impeach Matthew Graves and subject all of the cases that he has prosecuted for January 6th to review and a mistrial, and that's actually exactly what should happen. Also, another tip for those investigative journalists looking for information is that Yogananda Pittman was the lead person for the USCP, the United States Capitol Police, who provided the information to make all the criminal referrals. And she was given a sweetheart deal by Nancy Pelosi for a paid job to stay off the record and go quietly into the night. And there's only one, I think, person remaining in the USCP executive leadership that's still there, who was there since 2020 when Trump was running for re-election. So the general counsel, I actually forget his name off the top of my head, but the general counsel for the USCP is still there. And if his communications were subpoenaed by Congress, you'd find the root of all of these J6 fraudulent prosecutions.
Well, that would need to be done then, and you'll have my word that I'll push many members of Congress to do this, and we'll see where it leads us. Lastly, your final thoughts before I let you go. You could be forced to report any day. I don't know how you're managing to go through this. The human spirit's pretty amazing about what it can get through, but I'll give you the last word because you deserve it. Lord knows the court didn't give it to you.
Thank you, Grant. And I think you're on the right track there. There is no power and confidence that you can have more so than the knowledge that God is God and that He has granted us the unique spirit of being sovereign individuals, and to fight for liberty and freedom that God has ordained for us is the greatest calling and opportunity that anyone could have. I am incredibly honored and grateful that God's allowed me to fight for freedom, not only for myself, but for Americans. I want to thank Congressman Matthew Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and the others for putting on that hearing. It's the first of many. We need more accountability. We need more exposing of lies, and we need actual, real, true justice and retribution for the crimes against the American citizens that January 6th has become.
The stand that you have taken, not taking a plea deal when you did nothing wrong, if the writers of history are honest, which I'm afraid they won't be, you would go down as one of the great American patriots in the history of this country. I'm not sure they will be honest. There may not be many who know your name, but as long as I'm running this program, people will never forget your name and the other J6ers. John Strand, I appreciate you, buddy. Good luck.
Thank you, Grant. God bless you.
All right, absolutely. You too. All right, folks, this is what I mean by a government out of control, tyrannical. What do you do to protect yourself? Put some money into gold is one way to do it. It's a portfolio protection move. Only gold provides you privacy. They can't track what you're spending. They can't seize that money out of a bank account. It's not electronic. It's not digital. You put it in your gun safe. You hide it in your backyard. But you need to put some of your money into a commodity like this, at least, that's going to give you some protection from an overreaching government. So how do you do it? My friends at Birch Gold can certainly help you. Text America to the number 989898. That's America to the number 989898. And the folks at Birch Gold can help you. I trust them. I tell my friends and family, invest with Birch Gold if you're planning on doing this. They're very good people. They're patriots like we are. America to the number 989898. All right, coming up, the White House released a creepy Pride video. We'll show you that next. This whole Pride thing's backfiring.
Here are some of the headlines we are featuring today from your favorite news outlets at offthepress.com. Former President Donald Trump Tuesday answered dozens of charges in the classified documents case with pleas of not guilty. He then left Florida for his New Jersey home, where he held something of a victory celebration, giving a fiery speech condemning the Biden team for being politically prosecuted. At the White House, President Joe Biden threw another South Lawn party, this time for his new federal holiday, Juneteenth, commemorating the emancipation of slaves. Vice President Kamala Harris is getting another political makeover. The White House has assigned a longtime Democratic fixer to her office to help Harris as the re-election campaign kicks off. And give it up for the Las Vegas Knights hockey team. After just 6 seasons in the NHL, they are the Stanley Cup champions after thrashing the Florida Panthers in 5 games. For stories like these and more updates all day long from your favorite news outlets, go to offthepress.com.
These are our kids. These are our neighbors. Not somebody else's kids. They're all our kids. And our children are the kite strings that hold our national ambitions aloft.
Again, this is our kids nonsense. They're not your kids, Joe Biden. They're not. They're their parents' kids and only their parents' kids. Knock that stuff off. This whole pride stuff is backfiring on the left. I see that. It's going to do it for us tonight. Stinchfield's Army rolls. Thanks to you. Don't forget, check out my website, grantstinchfield.com. Subscribe to the podcast.